Aloha, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Faith and Family First. I'm your host, Eva Andrade, with my co host, Marcus Oshiro. And today we are going to dive deep into the soul, into the psyche, into the mind of Marcus Oshiro. Who is Marcus? Why does he do what he does? Do we care? Let's chat about that.
I'm intrigued.
I was thinking we should have some like dark music or whatever playing in the background.
I want the red light, the Biden red light.
Yes,
roll from the below, like there's hot coals below him.
I love this. Well, no, this is going to be a very laid back show.
Yeah,
this is going to be more of a talk story kind of show because people know you. People know Marcus Oshiro, and we've done a good job of over the show. The last few shows, telling people, okay, he was head of the finance committee and yada yada. Right. But everybody watching this from Hawaii, they have thoughts and questions running through their head.
Yeah, I think
So let's start with let's start with a couple of questions from our producer. Our producer has deep questions that every time you talk, these are going through her mind. Right. In fact, she has lost sleep because she does not know the answer to these questions. Yeah. So
at night. Yeah.
So the first question is well, before we jump into her question, which are good questions, what is your full name? Because you got to have a Japanese middle name, guaranteed.
Yeah, my full name is Marcus Robert Oshiro.
Where's the Japanese name?
There's none. Robert is my middle name, and it's interesting because you need to talk about 666 being the son of the devil, right? So I was thinking, oh my God, I'm the devil. Marcus Robert Oshiro, I'm the devil. Yeah, I know.
Gosh.
But yeah.
Now, so your Japanese background, obviously, what part of Japan is your family from?
Well, my family is actually not from Japan, prefecture, island, Japan, but from Okinawa.
Okay.
Which is southern Japan. Southern Japan.
Okay.
At one time, it was an independent kingdom, similar to the Hawaiian kingdom. It was a sovereign nation unto itself until it was invaded by some Satsuma samurai from the continent of the Japan island, and they were conquered and taken over, and then eventually ended up becoming part of Japan.
Okay, and the reason that I very delicately asked that question is because people do not realize if you call someone from Okinawa, not from Okinawa, or tell someone they're from Okinawa when they're not from Okinawa, you can create some serious problems.
Yeah, well, there's a distinction. It's like there's a distinction of anything, and I think that whole sense of Renaissance that came through when the Roots series was unveiled upon our country, and knowing your roots, where you're coming from, your European heritage, your Asian heritage, or you're Americans, but where did your grandparents come from? What country did they come from? Right? What's your native roots, right? And then ours trace back to Okinawa. So not Japan, Okinawa. And in fact, interestingly, my mother's maiden name was Oshiro. Well, she married my dad, Oshiro. So it's like,
you're a double Oshiro. You're Oshiro squared.
Yeah, 100%. 100% Okinawan Oshiro, yeah.
That's so great. Okay, that is a trivia. I did not know that. So that's good to know. So do you have any really cool stories from your ancestors? I mean, everybody always has like here's an example. On my mother's side of the family, my mother is from Sedalia, Missouri. We have a great uncle that rode with Jesse James, and his name is actually in some of the history books.
Wow.
So do you have any stories like that in yours?
No, I have nothing about the Jesse James, except my grandfather was like a cowboy when Kimo'o Farm raised cattle in the Wahiawa area. There was a dairy there, and so my grandfather was a cowboy, rancher, ranch hand. He also was a samisen player, great samisen player. And my grandmother brewed moonshine, okolehao. And in fact, that's one of the stories that my dad would share with me, that his job as a young boy was to be a lookout for when the police were coming down the dirt road. He was supposed to grab the still and then take all the parts and hide it in the banana patch. So we were kind of, you know,
And what was his nickname? Because our grandfathers, like Hawaii time, they all had nicknames. They all went with a nickname. Like my grandfather's name was Tramp. That was everyone knew him as Tramp Andrade.
No, we just knew my grandfather was Gigi. You know, that was
That is so great. Okay, so now let's get to the questions, the deep burning questions from our producer. So the first question she wants to know is, are you married and do you have any kids?
I'm married. I'm happily married to Lazanne Lai Xiang Fang Oshiro. We've been married for 25 years. We have no children yet, but who knows what might happen in the next
you know
several
who your
years.
children are? Your children is the island people.
Well,
you have been a father figure
well,
to a lot of people.
You know, I want to thank you for that because I consider that, you know, I have 2 great nephews and 2 great nieces, and I extend my aloha to the young people of today. I think they're severely challenged by the world that we inadvertently have given to them or we pass on to them. And I seriously take the responsibility that they're living in a world that we propped up or we allowed to happen. So, yeah, I like young people. You know, they keep me young. You know, they're great to hang out with, and they're the future. And so I like to pour into young people.
Oh, that is so good. And we're going to get more into what you like to do, you know, to unwind, because obviously everybody has crazy days and there's a way to. But before we get into that, though, you were a legislator. We've talked about that. You talked about being a legislator for 23 years.
Yes.
Well, what made you decide to run for office?
Back in 1994, I was a happy-go-lucky attorney at the Legal Aid Society of Honolulu, specializing in consumer law. And at that time, we were looking at creating a bill, legislation to fund indigent legal services for poor people who we knew could not retain, you know, services with an attorney. They can't afford it. So we're working with Nalo'io at that time. There was an immigration law firm. And we're looking at Domestic Violence Clearinghouse, Nancy Friedman folks, and then some other groups dealing with children and custody issues, and of course legal aid. And so we went in and had a measure passed all the way through and went to conference, and there died. And then I really got upset and angry that one individual senator could kill the bill. You know, I was very new to this process. I didn't know it, and I was really, you know, wide-eyed, bushy-tailed, and, you know, kind of naive in that sense back in 1992. And it kind of got to me when I found out more about the process, and I said, that's not right, that's not fair. So a friend of mine said, well, if you want to change it, you got to get in there. You can scream, yell, and shout, pout, but you can't do anything unless you get in the building. So why don't you run for office? And that's what motivated me. Before that, I had no thought or inkling at all of ever getting involved in politics, you know, official politics.
And so the first time you ran, did you win, or did you have to run a couple times?
No, I was fortunate. I ran from my roots. And that's where roots and where you graduate from high school is so important.
Yeah, and that was going to be my next question. But before you get there, finish answering. Yes.
Yeah, that's where you always go. Where do you grow up? Where did you spend your time? Elementary school, middle school, and high school. What's your community like? And that's where you should run from, because that's where you're most comfortable with. So certainly, I was living at Mililani for that time. But when I came back to Waiawa, I wasn't considered a carpetbagger because I went to school here. My family was here. My cousins and my uncles and aunties are all in Wahiawa. So that's where I ran. And fortunately, I worked hard, and there was some good name recognition of that Oshiro family that helped me along.
So in your time, your 23 years of serving as a legislator, what was the one bill that when it passed, you really felt like it was a real mistake for Hawaii and you were really, really sad that it passed?
There were more than a few of those. Because I was put into a position from my sophomore year my sophomore year, meaning my third session after getting reelected my first term, this is 96, I also was included in part of the leadership team. And I worked alongside someone like Anel Amaral, Tamo Komura, Paul Oshiro, Joe Suki, Calvin Zay, all these great legislative leaders, community leaders. And so I was part of the leadership group. So I understood the my role as a majority, assistant majority floor leader. And there are some measures that I looking back right now, I'm not too pleased with. One of them was dealing with Hawaiian homelands. I think there was a settlement bill that came through that I felt we should have done more. We could have done more for the beneficiary of the Hawaiian homelands. And I didn't feel good about that.
The reason I ask that is because I really like to drive home to our listeners and viewers that legislators are people. They're human beings. And just because a hot button issue shows up at the Capitol and sometimes they vote for it, it doesn't always mean that it's something that they truly have fought for and believed in. Sometimes there's a political reason for voting yes on something. But there are those times that a good legislator can be broken by a bill that's passed, one that they don't necessarily agree with.
Yeah, and I think the part of my experience there in 23 years that I thank God for is that there were some of those measures and bills and policy calls I had to make, I was privileged to make, that I was willing to die on the sword. And then such like same-sex marriage, physician-assisted suicide, medical marijuana. Those are the issues that I was ready to, lay my political
age
career,
of consent,
lay my legislative career down on. Also, the special session regarding the super ferry.
Right. Oh, yeah, that's right. The super ferry.
When Joseph and I were caught on camera, beefing it out in a hearing.
Let's go find that clip.
We should.
We should find some good clips of Marcus and have him talk about it. So on the other end of the spectrum, what name a bill or two that you were so happy that passed, that that you had part of that legacy?
There's many of them because I think collectively we did a lot of good work during that period of time. But one bill that I thought was, several bills. One was a bill that I thought was good. Knowing that most people are renters in this community, I wanted to make sure that renters had the same privileges as private property owners, homeowners. And so there was a bill that we approved to give renters the same rights of homeowners by allowing them through their lease agreements to put up a political sign in their yard. As long as they're tenants and they're holding true to the conditions and terms of their lease agreement, they can put up a sign, a yard sign, for their own candidate of their own choosing, and the landlord or owner cannot prohibit that.
I did not know you were part of that. I remember that.
Yeah, it's a little bill that we got out, but I was really thinking of my constituents in Waiawa because, roughly maybe 40% of them are renting. They're not homeowners, never will be.
Yeah.
But I wanted to engage them and make sure they had a voice, in the election.
Wow, that is interesting, though, because if you have a Trump owner building, but they have a Biden supporter living in the house that wanted to put a Biden sign, then that was perfectly okay.
Right, vice versa, right?
Right, yeah. Or vice versa. Yeah. I'm always trying to think outside the box, Okay, so on a stressful day, and I'm sure there are many when you're a legislator, because you're also an attorney, and when you were finished at the State House, you actually you jumped full on into your law practice. So what were you doing at that time?
I was primarily doing some trust and estate work. I was doing some small district court misdemeanor type cases.
Do I see a judgeship?
No. This is just.
You never want to be a judge?
No,
well, you're retired now. You can't.
So it's interesting that I gave up hopes of that long ago because I was such a gadfly in the legislature and it irritated the state senators so much. I said, no way in heck would they ever consider me to be, a judicial appointment. So I was super blessed, when Governor Ige did appoint me to the Hawaii Labor Relations Board as the chair, primarily based upon my legal background and also my labor background experience. And and I became a administrative law judge in that capacity. And I just thank God for that. 7 years. I never would imagine that many people would have imagined me being appointed to a position. So that was a blessing, and such a good place to be as an attorney, to return to their first love, the love of the law.
I just had a conversation with Sharon Har, and she's in the same situation where she's now back doing her law practice stuff, and she's happy. She's very, very happy.
Oh yeah. No.
Yeah, we got to have her on the show just to kind of catch up with her.
Yeah, we should catch up with her. She has a very interesting life, especially raising 2 twin daughters at this point in time.
I know. In fact, I bumped into her when I was doing an interview, and I see, that's the thing is, I know that people want to jump immediately to that issue that she had right before she left office, but there's more to legislators than sometimes these one.
She's a great mom to 2 beautiful young daughters, and she's putting all of herself and time and effort into them. I'm so blessed for her and her husband.
Yeah, so we'll keep that on our speed dial, because we're going to definitely get some really interesting guests coming up. Okay, so after these stressful days, what does Marcus Oshiro do to unwind?
Well, if I look like I have a little bit of tan on me, well, I'm not a golfer, although I did pick up golf when I retired November 1, 2024. I've been out a total of 7 times, 9 holes at the Ted Makalena golf course. I enjoy it. I can see how people get into it and become golf nuts.
That is hilarious. But you're also a water baby, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm a water baby. My first love and passion is surfing. I'm blessed to participate in one of the native sports, indigenous sports to Hawaii, by the Hawaiians, and continue this legacy and this cultural practice of Hi'inalu, surfing the waves.
So did you ever meet Fate Unagi?
No, but I can do it. I can do it. I got a glass of water and brother rap.
Can you give her a message? Can you tell her that I love her?
I love her too.
Everybody loves Fate Unagi.
Oh, Fate Unagi! I tell you.
In fact, everybody had a Fate Unagi in high school. Everybody did.
Well, as long as she doesn't go with Fitz Munai.
Fitz. Everybody had a. For those that have no idea what we're talking about, look it up. It's hilarious. Look up Rap Ruplinger. You gotta look him up.
And look at the Japanese roll call.
Yeah, that's good. No, my favorite is Auntie Maria Lani.
Maria Lani.
Yes.
Yeah. How about Willie Manuia?
Oh, Willie Manuili. Yes.
Willie Manuili.
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry. Yeah. That's what I do to calm down. I watch humorous stuff. Okay. So as we start winding down, Marcus, what advice would you have? So obviously we've got people of different age groups that listen to the show. Mostly they're women are that's who talks or watches us most. But if you were talking to a bunch of young people who were kind of thinking about running for office, what would you tell them?
I would tell them that this is a perfect opportunity to get involved, and the legislature just allowed a substantial pay raise to their salaries. And a legislator is a part-time position, but you get paid year-round, 2 checks every month. You get a permanent staff position. I think you get a $14,000 allowance they can use for your business as a legislator. You get subsidized covered parking in downtown Honolulu. You create your job. You are the ones who are going to design your job description. This is a great opportunity if you have the time, you have the will, and you have the interest. We want young people. 31 of the 51 members in the State House have been there for less than 4 years. Many of them just got elected in 2022. So in 2026, there's a chance for you to get involved as an elected official. I would encourage you. I really would encourage you. Step up to the plate. It's your generation's time to lead and get involved. Please.
All right, now we're going to shift gears a little bit, because this show is faith and family first.
Yeah.
So the first F is very important, and that's faith. And I think the biggest question that I get asked about you, Marcus, is, people knew you in office, but they didn't know that you were a Christian. And so people want to know your testimony. So why don't you tell people how you got to know Jesus? Or when did Jesus tap you on the shoulder and say, brah, what's up?
I came to know the Lord Savior Jesus Christ when I was a student at Hilo College. I was a Vulcan when I first went to college from Leloa High School. And through the Bible tracts, or the yellow tracts of, I think it was Campus Crusade for Christ, those yellow tracts, Brad Chow, Mike Kaneyama, Susan Crater, three of them working the campus, gave me a tract. It was Brad that gave me a tract and Mike that prayed over me. And it was several months after receiving that tract that I finally opened it up and, accepted, Jesus as my Lord and Savior. So this is back in 1978 at Hilo College. I went to him and I left him, and I went to him and I left him. I broke up. I went back. I for forgiveness, came back. So I went the whole 9 yards until really, I think, publicly in 2013 when I picked up the battle against same-sex marriage special session, that the revelation came to me and through the rest of the community that Marcus really believes this stuff. He really does.
And what was it like to be a Christian in the Capitol building during that time? And not just during that time, during all the time. It's difficult to bring your faith into the public square.
Yeah, it was difficult, not impossible. And I kind of have to apologize, to God for not really championing his interests. But I was kind of, honestly lukewarm and accommodating as much as possible. And I thought political expediency sometime overruled the day and my better judgment. But I just thank him for converting me from Saul, because I was persecuting you folks, Eva. I was. I mean,
the early days.
No, there was. So I was Saul, but like Pastor Alan Cardenas says, then you became, Paul, right? And I think I've never left that that assignment and that insight from 2013 on.
I think that's such a good reminder, because we could have said, you know what, Marcus is hard to work with. I don't want to have anything to do with him. He's not on our side on these issues. And we could have cut all future opportunities of working together by drawing that line, but we never did. No,
I think from there, I got an opportunity to demonstrate my commitment and, my veracity in the issues dealing with medical marijuana. And, as a Democrat, again, speaking against it.
That was really when I saw you starting to really come out more, was when, and it's really interesting because even though there were still other things we disagreed on, I remember how passionate you were about protecting the youth, and that just really endeared you to me, because I knew you were fighting for the right reasons.
And then the next round was, physician-assisted suicide. That was something that was being championed by even one of my good friends, John Radcliffe, right?
Oh, yeah.
Compassionate Care Act, but he and I just philosophically couldn't agree with it. I couldn't agree with my one of my mentors and friends, E.Q. McElrath, and I would have discussions about that. But I was blessed again to be able to pick up the gauntlet and fight those issues.
So fast forward to this legislative session, and you really, now you're retired now. And so you made that clear that you're a little bit more free now to do stuff. But why the issues that you picked this session? Why those?
Well, those are fundamental issues. I come from a legal perspective as a former law judge and an attorney. You don't need, and you should not mess around with the state constitution, any constitution, unnecessarily. It's almost a sacred document, sacred text that takes the broad strokes of fundamental legal principles and rights and obligations. You don't want to mess with it too often. Secondly, I saw some issues like the issue dealing with the transgender mutilation of young boys and girls without consent of their parents, and minors below the age of 18 self-diagnosis and asking for treatments. I thought that was abhorrent. I thought that was terrible, terrible, dangerous policy. And of course, the gaming legislation. Never in my imagination as a Democrat, in a very deep blue Democrat state like Hawaii, top to bottom, governor, lieutenant governor, House and Senate, to even contemplate, much less even think about approving gambling for money. And I said, no, I gotta get involved and stand up and speak my mind.
What did it feel like to be back in the Capitol building when you're on the other side now?
Kind of weird, but it felt good. It felt good to be, walking through these principles of, petitioning your government for redress of grievance, First Amendment rights. And then speaking in love and kindness to my former colleagues, right? And then, Eva, I keep on telling people, it's not that they're bad. They just don't know. They really don't know. They're ignorant, right?
You know what? The only time I ever got yelled at, and I already shared the story, so I won't get into the detail of it again, but the only time I ever got yelled at was in one hearing by a particular senator. And he wasn't really like yelling at me, like he was attacking me personally. He felt like I was attacking the resolution that he had authored. And so it was more like but he just was that type of legislator anyway.
Yeah. No, what I'm saying is basic education. You got the presumption of being ignorant. That's why they make those decisions. So it behooves me and people like myself to educate them. To allow them the opportunity to be educated, learn more about it. And I think that's why I'm a strong proponent of free speech. More speech, not less speech.
Yep. So in this last couple of minutes, this is going to be the fun part, because now what I want you to talk about what you'd like to see happen in the next maybe few months to year, and what you're willing to do maybe in the community.
Well, if I want to see people activated, engaged, and involved in their process, I think I need to then encourage them, give them the tools to do that. And I've been so jacked by these last several months working with Eva Andrade and some other people that I want to go forward, and I have some ideas of creating some segments of training sessions for people to empower them on their own rights and responsibilities as free citizens to get involved. And that's what I'm looking forward to, Eva. I really am.
And can I just say for the record that we got him first, right? He's been here on the podcast now taking over for Jim Hochberg, because I know we've done things before prior to this. We were doing our dog and pony show on marijuana, right? And back when Alan Cardenas was the executive director. Right. And prior to that, I remember having meetings on the same-sex marriage and assisted suicide stuff.
Yeah.
We would go out and do dog and pony show.
Yeah.
So you want to do more of that?
I want to do that. I think it's time, and I have the availability to do that, and that's my contribution to the community and the larger cause of all of us.
What's your favorite scripture?
Be anxious for nothing, but in all things through prayer and supplication, let your requests be made known to God, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, shall guard your heart and mind in Christ Jesus.
That is awesome. I mean, there's no way we can top that. That's a great ending. Make sure you like this video, share, subscribe, hit that notification button so you know every time we upload a new video, and comment below. Let us know, your thoughts on this. And if you want Marcus to come and do any kind of presentation at your church, send me an email, eva@hawaiifamilyforum.org, and I'll be happy to help organize that. And Marcus, we look forward to getting to know you even more in future episodes. Mahalo, everybody. We will see you next week.